Hello, my name is Terry. I'm the manager of customer support. And this is the Race autocomplete interview about what causes video game lag. I'm going to take these a little bit out of order. I'm going to go to the bottom first, an overworked GPU. So GPU is graphics processing unit. For most video game consoles or computers that are designed for gaming, the GPU is a separate device. It's your graphics card. And it has its own processing separate from the main processor on the computer or the console, as the case may be. GPUs also have their own built-in memory, depending on how robust they are. Sometimes they'll have fans. The idea of having a separate GPU is to be able to handle high-demand graphics applications like video games. That said, there are often games that require even more than some GPUs can handle, especially if you are playing the newest, most recently released game, and maybe your GPU is a couple of years old. The requirements for that game may push the limits of what your GPU can provide. When that happens, you may have issues like lag completely unrelated to your internet or your data transmission speed in any way. Beyond comparing the requirements of your game to the specs of your GPU, there's not really an easy way to know that that's the problem, but it is important to keep in mind when troubleshooting lag issues that it may not be the internet. It may be the hardware. Not enough internet bandwidth. That's a big one. Race is at the forefront of making it no longer a problem. Bandwidth is the amount of data transmission that your internet circuit can handle at any given moment. If your game requires a certain amount of download speed or a certain amount of upload speed to be able to function well, your bandwidth can be a limiting factor. Race provides 1,000 megabits per second, the fastest residential internet that you can get in most parts of the country. In some of our newer markets, we offer 10,000 megabits per second, which is faster than most business applications can get in most parts of the country. If you have a gigabit or a 10 gigabit circuit from Race, bandwidth is never going to be a problem for your gaming. Problems with internet speed. Speed and bandwidth are different measurements. Your speed is the amount of data that your device can send and receive, whatever the bandwidth available to it. If the bandwidth is not a limiting factor, the speed may be. And speed is frequently an issue with the device itself rather than the internet. What's even more important than speed a lot of the time is latency, which we refer to as ping in a lot of applications. It's generally considered for a fairly average online video game that if you have about 40 megabits per second of speed, and if your ping is under about 40 milliseconds, that you're probably going to have very good performance. With Race, your bandwidth is essentially unlimited in terms of the game. You've got 1,000 megabits per second available. Latency over fiber are usually less than 10 milliseconds. That can vary if you happen to be in a remote area, hundreds of miles from the data center, or if there's a network issue happening that's causing your data to take a longer than normal path to get to the internet, pings can be variable. But on average, on the Race network, pings are far lower than on a traditional copper network like what you would get from the phone company or the cable company. So the combination of low ping and high bandwidth means that in almost all circumstances, your hardware is the limiting factor on how well your games perform. Bad internet connection type. So this can mean a couple of different things. Most commonly, if you want to get optimum performance from your device, you will want to have what we call a hardwired connection, which means that your device is connected directly to the internet router with an Ethernet cable. Ethernet is by far the most stable means of connecting to the internet because it's an actual wire. There's nothing that can really interfere with that. Many devices, for whatever reason, can't use an Ethernet connection. Either the device itself doesn't have an Ethernet port to plug in, or perhaps it's too far from the router for you to be able to run an Ethernet cable to it, in which case we're using Wi-Fi. And Wi-Fi can be either 2.4 gigahertz or 5 gigahertz, the frequency that the Wi-Fi is transmitted on. 2.4 gigahertz has much better range. It'll go about twice as far, but it will only give you about a tenth of the speed compared to a 5 gigahertz connection. So when you're troubleshooting something like lag, knowing exactly what type of connection your device has to the internet is important. If you can plug it in using an Ethernet cable, you should. That will always be the most stable type of connection. And if you are having lag because of a connection issue, that will usually fix it. If you can't use Ethernet, try to use 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi. That will give you better speeds, and it's also less susceptible to interference from other radio waves because far fewer things use the 5 gigahertz band to communicate. The 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi band is limited in terms of the speeds that it can offer. You're generally not going to get more than about 25 to 50 megabits per second out of it, which is enough for most games, but certainly not all. And it's very susceptible to interference from other devices, especially if you are in a densely packed neighborhood or an apartment building. You are likely dealing with interference from neighbors and nearby businesses, anything that is in radio frequency range of your router and also transmitting a radio frequency is going to make your devices perform less well. If you have questions about internet connections and you want to know how is your device connecting, is there a better way it can connect, you can always reach out to Race customer support. If you are using a Race router, we have the ability to log into that remotely and we can see how your devices are connected. We can give you advice and maybe help you to optimize those connections.